Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. In our continuing series where Brian and I break down some different handicapping angles for you, this week's topic, we're going to look at handicapping the college bowls. This is the season. They just announced the bowl matchups this week. And Brian, the first question I'm going to ask you, and what we're going to try to do is maybe some of our favorite angles or things that we look at in the bowls, but the big question I'm going to have, and it's one of the top things on my list when I start handicapping the bowls, is motivation. Some of the teams are happy to be where they're at, other teams are not, and that's something I've always used over the years as part of my handicapping for the bowls. This year, we've got something totally different because of the playoff system. We've got two teams that definitely feel they should have been in the top four. That's TCU and Baylor. I think TCU has the bigger argument, even though they lost to Baylor, and that's a whole nother debate. It's the fact they lost by 3, and they lost on the road in a high-scoring game. You know, you talk about a quality loss. You know, in the committee, 1 week, scores matter, then the next week, they didn't matter. So, you know, everybody's making the big deal about the head-to-head. I think a 3-point loss on the road, when earlier in the year they talked about that 5-point loss with Mississippi State at Alabama, why it didn't penalize them. So that's a whole different discussion. But these teams that got screwed, basically, or feel they got screwed, how do you think they react? Chip on their shoulder, something to prove, or are they going to be distracted?
Well, that's why you have to read. And that's the thing. You put in ball plays from the beginning all the way through the game, by the time the game starts. That's one of those things you just have to read what the players are going to say, what the players have. There's certain teams that want to be there, certain teams that are disappointed. Usually when you enter the year, it's high expectations and you don't get there and you're playing in Shreveport. If you're South Carolina and you're playing in Shreveport, why do you want to play in Shreveport? That's something to take a look at. TCU, I think, is going to come out with a chip on their shoulder. They should, because they're not a big major team that you know about. Baylor was highly thought of coming into the season. They may not have the same interest. I think both of them, because the coaches are excellent coaches, I think they'll be ready. But you want to read the local newspapers. You want to read the quotes coming from the players. Real quick side on that same thing, Central Michigan. I tweeted this out at B. Leonard Sports in my Twitter followers. Central Michigan, it was watching. They set up in a room and they were watching each bowl go off, and they had a listing of all the logos. This one's off, and they go, oh, this one's off. Oh, finally it got down to the Bahamas Bowl or the bowl in Detroit, Michigan. And you know the thoughts in their head is, oh my God, we get to go to a bowl and we get to go from Kalamazoo or whatever to Detroit. Yeah. And when that thing come up, where they were playing in the Bahamas, these kids went nuts. Yeah. And that was so much fun, because you don't want to play in your hometown. You want to go somewhere. Absolutely. And to go to the Bahamas, first time in the Bahamas Bowl. But that was just great to see.
Yeah, that's something that actually we could get one of our friends with the databases, where people actually were playing in their state. Oh, they got home field advantage. I think it's a disadvantage, because for that very same reason. How do you get excited? You played all year. It's a reward to go somewhere where you're always at, you know, when you're familiar.
It depends on who it is, who's playing. If you're a MAC school, obviously it doesn't have the same difference as if you're Florida State and you end up playing right down the street. You know, MAC schools are just happy to play.
If you're playing in the Orange, but you know, if it's a big bowl and it's in your state, it's different.
So it's an individual basis.
A few years ago, to give an example of this, if you remember, Florida felt they got screwed in the SEC. There was a bunch of one-loss teams or whatever, and they thought they had deserved the shot. They didn't get it, and they played the bowl game against Louisville, Teddy Bridgewater. I think it was 2 years ago. They were an absolute, complete no-show in that bowl game. I've never seen a team, you know, they weren't prepared at all, and Louisville just sliced and diced them that game, and the score could have been worse than it was. They actually called the dogs off. That's something you got to be concerned about.
You definitely do, and it goes back to where I was saying, established programs, the USCs. Just go back, Oklahoma. Oklahoma coming into the season, I believe they're ranked number 3. Now they have just lost on their home field to their arch rival. what is the motivation for Oklahoma to play in this bowl game? A lot of this, you've got to read between the lines sometimes and figure out who's coming to play.
And especially, and it's great that you said Oklahoma because it triggered a couple other thoughts. Last year, Oklahoma had a monster bowl game. Who'd they play? They played Alabama, who wasn't playing for a national championship, didn't show up, was not interested in that game. And Stoops, you know, some early comments from earlier in the year about how strong the SEC was, sent a message in that game. Now, after such a big bowl last year, and then to go from a penthouse to the outhouse, so to speak, that's a thing that I look at, where they were in last year's bowls to this year, and look and see what they did last year. I like to look at teams. One of my things on my radar, first thing I'll do is look, were you in a bowl last year? How big was the bowl? What did you do in the bowl? Because teams that lost their bowl last year, if you're a senior on this team and you went to a bowl last year, you don't want to lose 2 bowl games in a row. So you got a little more focus, a little more effort, I think, because there are distractions at these bowl games. Like you just said, how excited Central Michigan's going to be going to the Bahamas. On the same token, now you have to worry and watch, are they partying in the Bahamas? Are they on the beach? Are they chasing women? You know, are they having good practices? So the work's not done.
Yeah, I was, as I said, I was up in Reno last weekend. I was watching the coaches show from Nevada, and he said they're going to New Orleans. And he said there's always been the feeling, do you let the kids treat this as a reward and let them go out and have a memory? Mm-hmm. Or are you one of those coaches that just reins the players in and is real strict? Mm-hmm. He says, I'm going to treat it a little bit in the middle, which I think pretty much you should do it. But it's good to hear the coach come out and say how he's going to treat this, because some coaches, you take your vacations once you graduate. This is what we're going for. Another thing I always take a look at is if you go back to the same bowls again. Yeah. I think when Boise went to the same bowl like 3 years in a row, then they got to go somewhere else, they were excited, even though it may not have been, maybe it was Shreveport. It was a place where they hadn't been before, and I don't want to knock Shreveport, I've never been.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be getting any invites.
Yeah, Sacramento's already knocked me off the list for the NBA. But when you're going someplace different, so BYU, a lot of these teams go to the same bowl every year. Once they go somewhere different, there's more excitement. So keep that in mind also. All
right. Well, good stuff. Hope this helps you with your bowl handicapping. We're going to be back with more of these videos looking at different things to help you become a better handicapper. He's Brian Leonard. I'm Marco D'Angelo. Thanks for watching WagerTalk.com.